I'm Molly from Wild Olive, and this video is a quick look at embroidery pattern transfer methods. Unless you're buying a pattern that is already printed on fabric, usually in a kit, you need some way to get your pattern onto your fabric or whatever it is that you're embroidering on. And there's so many different ways to do that I'm just going to kind of go over what those are and explain some of the reasons why I might choose one over another in a different situation. So let's get started with this. There are so many different ways that you can transfer a pattern, but the most basic is tracing. And in fact, there's lots of different ways that you can use tracing, and some different methods use some variation of tracing. So we're going to talk about all of those throughout this, but the simplest, because there's so many different tools you could use, the simplest is a basic pencil. I just use a regular, like this is a number 2 pencil, and I try to make it really nice and sharp so that I can get really fine lines. When you use this on your fabric, it's not going to come off. The lines are pretty much going to be permanent. They may wash away over time a little bit, but you can't count on that. And you don't want to rub it with an eraser to try and get it off. That's a surefire way to have smudgy pencil marks on your fabric. So don't do that, but do use a really sharpened pencil and just lightly trace the pattern. Try not to press hard and drag it because that will distort the fabric, but you can just trace with a regular pencil. That's fantastic. Okay, another thing that you can do is use a water soluble pen. These come in different varieties and different colors. Some are like a half one kind, half another kind, but a water soluble pen you can trace and it will vanish in water. The thing that I always recommend is fully soak your pattern after you've embroidered it, because if you just like spritz it with water or rinse it a little bit, sometimes it doesn't rinse away all the way to the edges, and the color will show up as like a little ring around your embroidery. It's a terrible thing. And then you can get rid of it. You have to wash it again, but it'd be better to not do that. So sometimes if I don't want to rinse my embroidery, that's when I'll choose the pencil. But if it's okay for me to rinse my embroidery, or that's like the easiest way to go, I'll use a wash away pen. Now, another thing that you can do is, this is from the same brand, but this type it vanishes just in the air over time. And there's different pens that will go like different amounts of time. So this one is supposed to be like a day, and I swear it's like a couple of hours. So you got to work fast with some of them. Others, it will last for a week, and then it just slowly vanishes over time. So if you've got more time on your hands, but you're still going to work on it quickly, one that vanishes with air is great. But again, if it's a long-term project, don't use these. That's not a good idea. Okay, another way that you might want to transfer is with an iron or a heat-sensitive pen. Friction brand pens are the most common for this, but other places make them as well. And these are great for when you need to get the pattern markings off. Like a pencil is permanent markings. You want to be able to get the pattern markings off, but you don't want to soak it or leave it to time. So then you just iron the back of your embroidery afterwards, and the markings from a friction pen or a heat sensitive pen will vanish. So that's really great if you don't want to soak your fabric, you need it to last longer, but you do need the pattern markings to go away. These do come in white. I've never used a white one, so you could use that on darker fabric, but it's harder to trace on darker fabric. So not so sure on that one. I haven't tested that myself. So, all right, those are the basic tracing things that I would say. But then we're going to talk about some other ways that you might trace patterns as well. Another way that you can trace a pattern, but not directly onto your fabric, is with an iron transfer pen. There's also a brand that makes a pencil. I've never had any luck with it. The Sublime Stitching fine tip pens are the ones that I prefer. I think that they're the best option. They do come in other colors, but what you do is you trace your pattern onto another paper, and I like tracing paper for this. I like a heavier weight tracing paper. This is the stuff that I have. It's 25 pound. It's a little bit thicker and more sturdy, and I think it holds up well for ironing. And so you want to transfer or trace, I should say, your pattern reversed, especially if there's any words on it, because otherwise they will get flipped. So your pattern will get reversed when you iron it, and you can put that directly on fabric. Those markings, though, are permanent. So you'll want to use that for a time when it's okay that the markings are in place the whole time. You're going to completely cover them with embroidery. Also a time when you don't want to have to soak your fabric. I have tried this on felt as well. It doesn't come out great. It comes out okay, I would say, half the time. So, you know, hit or miss. It's also good for fabrics that are light in color, but a little bit thicker. So you wouldn't be able to see through the fabric as well to just trace directly. So that's helpful. And this is similar to old style iron transfer patterns. This is from Aunt Martha's. Sublime Stitching also makes iron transfer patterns. There's a few other places that do. And these you just lay down, face down on your fabric, iron it from the back, and it transfers right to your fabric. So that's iron transfer. And again, sometimes a little bit of tracing and sometimes not. But there's still other reasons why you might use tracing paper, but in a different way. And I use a different tracing paper for that as well. So for this, I get cheaper, thinner tracing paper, and it's a little bit more opaque, this version that I have, but it tears more easily. For this, I usually trace the pattern onto the tracing paper with just a regular pencil, and then I lay it over my fabric. This is especially helpful for stitching on felt. It's probably the most used way that I transfer patterns to felt. So I take that pattern on the tracing paper, I lay it onto felt, and I hold it in place. Sometimes I will stitch it in place with a thread, like a basting thread, and then I embroider through the felt and the paper. Then after you're done with the embroidery, you just carefully tear the paper away. And that's a way to get patterns onto something like felt that is harder to trace on or transfer on. That's one way. There's another way as well. A different type of tracing paper, I told you there was a lot of these. A different type of tracing paper is also known as carbon paper. This is an old version of DMC's tracing paper, but they do have, they still carry it now. And it comes with different colors. There's a yellow version and a blue version, and you lay the colored side down on your fabric, then you put your printed pattern over that and you trace the pattern, and it's going to transfer the powder or the carbon onto your fabric. This is not my favorite method to use. I find it's a little bit more finicky. I don't always get a clear transfer. I have extra powder that gets left on my fabric, but sometimes that could be useful. I've actually used this method when I was going to embroider on wood, and I traced onto a thin piece of wood, and the paper transferred really nicely. So that could be useful in some cases. Now, let's talk about my most favorite transfer method next. Okay, the last transfer method that I'm going to talk about today is water-soluble paper, or water-soluble stabilizer. It has a bunch of different names, and Sulky is the brand that I use the most, and it is sometimes called Sulky Sticky Fabri-Solvy. Sometimes it's Stick and Stitch. They're both the same thing. Other brands make it. DMC makes it. They call it Magic Paper, which is a perfect name for this, because what happens is you take this material with your pattern on it, and you stick it onto your fabric, you embroider, and then you soak it, rinse it away, and the material goes away, the transfer material goes away, and your embroidery is what's left. Here's the ways that I use this. I use it when I just want like a really fast way to transfer a pattern, especially large patterns, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I use it for darker fabrics. That's great because you just stick it on and you can see your pattern so clearly. And I also use it on felt. If you use it on felt, you should always pre-soak your felt, because Wool felt will shrink in the water otherwise. So you want to pre-shrink it, then do your embroidery afterwards. There are several different ways that you can have your pattern on this water-soluble stabilizer. One way is to buy the patterns pre-printed. Missouri Star Quilt Company, these are two sets that they sell. They have a bunch of them, and they come pre-printed, and you soak this. These require just a little bit of extra work to get the pattern markings to float away, but they are adorable and really handy. Other companies, like lots of different pattern designers, make these available. They're usually referred to as stick and stitch patterns or something similar. Those are really, really handy. If you buy the sheets of this, they can run through your printer, which means that any digital pattern you have, you can print it right on this material. And that's what makes it so fast, especially for larger designs. So if it's got a lot of little details, print that thing, and as long as you can soak whatever it is you're stitching, this will save you so much time. It's ridiculous. But you can also trace directly onto this. So if I'm going to do something where I'm going to soak it, it's a small pattern, but I still need to use the water-soluble stabilizer, I will trace on it. Sometimes I use a regular pencil if that's what I have, but what I've learned is that if you use a water-soluble pen, like that blue water-soluble pen, if you trace your pattern with that, the ink completely vanishes as well. So sometimes that's really helpful. It takes care of every bit of transfer, marking, and material all in one soak. So those are the basic methods that I use and some of the ways that I use them. I trace, I sometimes iron transfer, and sometimes I print and use water-soluble stabilizer. And then within those, the sky's the limit for what kinds of tools you might use to get the best results for the specific project you're working on. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you have any questions or are looking for more information about pattern transfer or how to use different kinds of patterns for these, just ask those down in the comments, and I am happy to help the best that I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.